tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah mavir nesara gezerah, that tzedakah literally can eliminate, that's the power of tzedakah, of giving a coin before a class or any time or throughout the day. There's the power of giving tzedakah, and that it actually can change or transform a gezerah, a bad edict or something on high that's negative, that's heading our way. And certainly the world, it doesn't hurt to be giving coins. And that was actually the Tzemach Tzedek's response in 1828 is give more coins regularly throughout the day and increase in prayer. What's so interesting is there was just a bit ago, at 11 a.m. our time, it was a global,
Which one?
there was a global learning.
No, not dental?
Hold on a second. Yeah, see?
Oh, so put it in this one. Yeah.
Your mic is on. So I'm hearing your conversation there. I'm not sure what's going on. Thank you. Sorry. So there was actually a global gathering, virtual gathering of tefillah all over the world, and people logged in from all over. And the rabbi gave over a talk that actually happened in 1987 on this exact day, on this day on the calendar. And in this day, the Rebbe is talking about chaos in the world, and that the world is at this chaotic place, upside down, or there's a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles. And what are things that we could do? And the Rebbe says that it's Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which means the month of Nisan, the month of when we were freed from Egypt, the month of Geula, is, we know Rosh Chodesh is this week, right? It's Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And what is it about Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is a month of Savior, a month of where we were, we got out of our enslavement. And the Rebbe says that on this day, it's actually a really, really powerful day spiritually, powerful day for blessings, a powerful day for many things. And the Rebbe gives actually 3 things that he really feels like could channel blessings into the world. And this, again, was 1987. But if you read the text, it literally seems like it's talking about today. Okay. It's like as relevant today as in 1987, seemingly even possibly more, where the whole world is in chaos. And actually even says the Rebbe says that we seem like we're being challenged to keep sharing Torah, because schools are shut down, right? We could look at it as exactly what's going on now. Schools are shut down, Hebrew schools are shut down, and yet we have to persevere through it. And so the Rebbe says there's 3 areas we can actually increase. Obviously, tzedakah, prayer, and that men, women, children, everyone should increase in Torah learning. So with that, I'm going to open up our Torah and Tea. We've been learning together Torah and Tea, I think, since the triplets are about a year old. So we're at 9 years now, 8 or 9 years we've been studying together. And usually it's in the Chabad house. And I wrote to everyone, feel free, get your own coffee, get your own tea, get whatever it is you're drinking, no judgment, and join us together to learn a little bit. Today we're going to learn about Parshas Vayikra. So just to give you a general overview of this week's Torah portion, in Vayikra, the Torah reading, it's beginning the 3rd book of the Torah. Right? We Genesis and Exodus. Now we're starting Vayikra, and the last book of the Torah that we just finished last Shabbat, we're talking about the tabernacle, and construction of the tabernacle. And last week we completed the Torah book of Exodus, talking about it, and it describes the description of the tabernacle and the details and the construction, which we talked about a little bit last week in Torah and Tea. And this week actually begins a portion that describes a lot of different sacrifices, different offerings that's given, and offered by the priests. The Jewish people brought different offerings, and there are different ones, fowls and animal and meal offerings. Throughout this book, it's going to discuss a lot of details about the offerings. So we've often said that a Torah is Torah Chaim. It's a living, vibrant, relevant Torah. And that when we look in that week's Torah portion, as the Alter Rebbe said, "Midarf leben mitzitzai," we could live with the times, meaning look at the Torah portion. There's something that's real and something that's practical and something that's relevant to where you are right now. So what's interesting is the Parsha of Vayikra is actually when kids are brought to a cheder, the first time they're going to start learning Torah, they actually start with Vayikra. So it's a really classic question: why Vayikra? Vayikra is about offerings. Vayikra doesn't seem like, maybe you talk about creation of the world, Genesis, or God taking us out of Egypt. Like, why do we start with a young child who's our first introduction to Torah learning? Should it be through the Parsha of Vayikra? And so what we'll do is I'm going to put up on the screen, and if anyone wants to read, feel free to read. If not, I'll read. I'm going to put up on the screen the text of the first pasuk, and we'll look at it and try to understand what is so fundamental about this, that this is how we introduce a child to Torah learning. So I'm going to try, give me a second. I'm going to try to see how this tech works. I think I should be able to do it. This is actually from an incredible source. If you ever want to learn, there's online an audio, Chabad.org has on one of their sites, it has something called Taste of Text. It's a 20-minute Torah class, and it's amazing. We're not going to cover the full text here, but we're going to actually cover some of the ideas and broaden it and personalize it, obviously. So if you look at the first one, and I'm going to see if I can zoom a little bit. Give me a second. There we go. So if you look at the word Vayikra, does anyone want to read the first two passages, the first two sentences over there, Psukim? You guys see it? Go ahead, read it for us.
And he called to Moses, and the Lord spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When a man from among you brings a sacrifice to the Lord from animals, from cattle, or from the flock, you shall bring your sacrifice.
Okay, interesting. God is talking to Moses. Not an unusual experience, except look very carefully at that letter, the word Vayikra. Does anyone see anything in the Hebrew, anything interesting about it? Do you see anything interesting about the word Vayikra? Anything unusual? Okay, if you look at Vayikra, there's a teeny aleph.
Aleph. Yeah.
Yes, what's the aleph? What's the deal, Sarah?
It's usually spelled with an aleph at the end.
There is an aleph.
That's tiny.
Yes.
Yeah.
The aleph in the word Vayikra is tiny. What's going on? Why is the aleph tiny? Okay. Something. It's not a mistake. It's not that the editor wasn't there. So that in the Torah, the aleph for Vayikra is really small. So right away, we know Rashi is a foremost commentator, and Rashi's going to right away look at text and analyze text. And really, to understand any Torah study, you need to study Rashi. So if we scroll down, we see the Rashi, the first Rashi. Does anyone see the first Rashi? I'm going to minimize it a drop so we can see. Do you see the first Rashi?
Yes.
Rashi's going to right away start questioning. What does Rashi say? Anyone want to read for us the Rashi? I'll read it. I don't mind. If anyone wants to read, just wave your hand. We can make sure you're unmuted. So Rashi comments on the passage, and Rashi says, every time God communicated with Moses, whether it was represented by the expression Vayadaber, and he spoke, which means and he spoke, or Vayomer, and he said, or Vayitzav, and he commanded, it was preceded by God calling to Moses with the word Kriya. Calling is an expression of affection, and the same expression employed by the ministering angels when addressing each other. So Rashi's right away saying, interesting, the choice of words, and explaining that even though it's usually either Vayadaber or Vayomer or Vayitzav, Vayikra has this like drawing close, like a karov, like an affectionate or warm. It's an interesting thing Rashi's noticing. But what's the deal with the small aleph? And why does a young child learn this with a small aleph? Learn this first, okay? So I'm going to stop the sharing so we can actually get back to the conversation. Here we go. Okay. So here's where I want to ask you a question. Can you think of any reason why a passage that begins with offerings is what a child is introduced to? Any thoughts? I mean, any hypothesis as to why that's the introduction? None, right? Go ahead. Just unmute yourself and jump in.
Well, I remember seeing somewhere that like a sacrifice is it's about understanding that your life is in God's hands, and that if it wasn't for the animal, it could be you who was dead. So you need to understand that that really your life is all in God's hands, and maybe it's just important to teach the children that early.
Okay, that's a really good thing. Like maybe if the kid right away starts off their Torah learning by understanding like everything in life is in God's hands. And by the way, we certainly in 2020 can relate to that. If we ever tried to envision or imagine where we'd be today, no one could ever, I mean, maybe a script in a Hollywood movie, but not something where we think a month ago, did we think this is where we'd be? All in our own homes, in our own little bubbles, in our own, this is a very fantastical reality. And yet, as I shared last week, we are in God's hands. Everything's in God's hands. And it was a month ago. It's just now I think we're a little bit more aware of how little control we actually have. Thank you. Any other thoughts as to why that could be? I know we have more people on the phone. Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in and share. Any other thoughts of why that would be the case?
I would think,
Okay.
go
ahead.
I would think as little kids, we start teaching them to share things. So sacrifice would be giving something.
Okay.
So then we teach a little, you know, when they're small, you have to share, you have to give. So maybe some lesson there.
Excellent. Excellent. That's a very practical thing. Like maybe at the end of the day, we're teaching our kids, it's not all about you, right? We all think, God, you know, if you're raising children, this is one of the things you want to teach your children. Yes, the world is all about you, but actually not all about you. You got to be giving. That's a really good lesson. The fundamentals of being, you know, tzedakah and being in a culture of people who give. These are all realities and values, very core values to us as Jews. So maybe that's part of it. Okay. Any other thoughts before we jump in? Because this is obviously a question that was asked because it is an interesting, between the small aleph and the reason we're introducing a young child to it, the Torah that way, there's something going on here. Okay. It's not a theory. It's not like what's the deal? Okay. So we're going to jump into two texts. The question was asked, and I really probably should get a mouse. I don't have to do this reach over like this, but okay. Let's look at the Razah. So the Razah asks this like goes through this process of this kind of discussion of the small aleph. Someone please read for us the Razah, which is right, this text right here. If anyone sees it, if anyone wants to jump in and read it, I don't mind reading though. So whatever you guys want. Do you see the text? You see it? Okay. All right. So the Razah asks, why is Vayikra written with a small aleph? Even though Moses spoke directly with God regularly, Moses remained humble. Okay. Interesting. It's kind of a reminder or a hint to the fact that Moses was known as Anav Mikal Ha'adam, the most humble of all man, right? Moses had a regular dialogue with Hashem over his lifetime, right? And yet he had a certain dose of humility, which we'll talk about shortly, okay? The Klayakar was another commentator, says the small aleph is an allusion to the custom that small children traditionally begin their studies with this book. As the Midrash states, why do we initiate young children with a section of sacrifices? Just as sacrifices are pure, so too the children are pure. How beautiful is that? So it's not necessarily to teach the children, but what it is a reminder, just as a young child, when they come into the world, there's such a purity to them, you know, as life evolves and things get a little more complicated, but when they're young and there's nothing like a young child. The purity, the innocence, it's something very special about that stage, okay? So beautiful explanations from the Razah and the Klayakar, but what actually I wanted to add, there's a beautiful story that the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, told. And he told this story about the Tzemach Tzedek. So a little bit of historical context. The Tzemach Tzedek was a third Chabad Rebbe, and his mother, Rebbetzin Devar Leah, passed away when he was a young child. And she actually, very insane, like an intense story, but she actually gave up her life. She heard that there was a gezerah in heaven, that her father, who was the Alter Rebbe, was going to pass away. And she actually said, take my life instead. And she passed away shortly after, but she asked her father to please raise her child. Her child was raised by the Alter Rebbe and then became the one of the predecessors, okay? After the third Rebbe. Alter Rebbe was the first Chabad Rebbe. So this young Tzemach Tzedek, when he was going to Cheder, and he was going to school, there's a beautiful story told about his first experience with this Vayikra. okay? And it's going to really shed some interest, like it's going to bring this whole conversation to a different place. So the right after his third birthday, Rabbi Shneur Zalman took him to go learn. And he told the Malamed, the teacher, to open up with the book of Vayikra, okay? And the child, a young kid, 3-year-old, looked at the Chumash, looked at Vayikra, and said, why is the word Vayikra written with a little aleph? Now, a young child, you know, a 2-year-old, 3-year-olds, why? They notice every single detail. One of my favorite things about teaching in preschool was this sense of wonder that a young child has intuitively. And the world is so interesting. And so many times, you know, like Sarah, you started off, you said that part of the blessing in this has been the slowing down, paying attention to the details, right? A young child, they're not worrying about the mortgage and they're not worrying about making sure the food is stocked. Their world is, and yet the sense of wonder and curiosity is so alive. It's one of my favorite parts of teaching. I taught, 2-year-olds for 8 years. And that was one of my favorite things, was that natural sense of curiosity and wonder. So, okay, he looks at the text. He right away notices that something's different. Now, the Alter Rebbe didn't just go and answer, because there had been the answer from the Kleyaka or the answer from the Reza. Either of those answers would have sufficed. But the Alter Rebbe went into a kind of meditative state, and he then gave a very, very interesting explanation, which I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on. So the Alter Rebbe answered that the first man, Adam, was Kap of Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was literally the handiwork of God, like made by God himself, with, his own hands. And God attested that his wisdom was greater than that of angels, meaning Adam was wiser than angels. That's actually why Adam was the person who named every single animal, because he was able to see the essence of who the animal was, what their energy was, and give them their name them. So he had this great wisdom, and Adam was aware of his own greatness, and this awareness caused him to overestimate himself, and it actually led to what? What happened with Adam? We all know. He ate from the tree of knowledge. The sin happened. So Adam was aware of where he came from. He had this soul. He was made by God. He understood the advantages of who he was. And that actually took him to a place where he made a mistake. He ate from the tree of knowledge. So that's the Alter Rebbe's part one of his answer. And then he went on to explain that Moshe, who possessed the soul from a highest place, from deep divine wisdom, right? He had a very holy neshama. He was Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the leader of the Jewish people, right? He was aware of his greatness, but it did not lead him to aggrandizement. On the contrary, it actually evoked within him this kind of brokenness or anguish of heart that made him extremely humble in his own eyes. And he thought to himself, thinking that if someone else had been blessed by God with these gifts, then the person would achieve way more than I achieved. And thus God testified in the Torah that Moshe was the most humble man on the face of this earth. So here we have two different approaches to sense of self. One is Adam. I'm aware of my gifts and my talents, my abilities, who I am, my strengths, and we see that it led Adam to falter. One is I'm aware that I have gifts and talents, but I'm aware that they came from God. And that leads to a level of humility of like, wow, I have these gifts and these talents. If someone else had them, they'll probably do way, way better than me. Okay? So which one is it? And how do we navigate this? And I'm sure anyone here, you're a parent, you're a teacher, you're a student, you understand the subject of self-esteem in 2020 is huge. I once got a phone call from a mom, and she said, I don't know, my child has no self-esteem. I tried, I tried to put her in karate. I tried to put her in art school. I tried to do all these things to give her self-esteem, and she doesn't have it. So what are your thoughts about self-esteem? A sense of self. Where do you think the world's holding on this? Any thoughts? Feel free to jump in. You can unmute yourself. I'm sure everyone here has some ideas on self-esteem. Anyone want to share?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
okay.
Sarah. Thank you.
I
We'll go
will.
to
I mean,
Sarah
I
first.
have, as you know, I have a lot of thoughts about that. The idea of esteem is very misplaced. Self-worth is important, to have a realistic sense of what you can accomplish and what things you are good at, what your strengths are and your weaknesses. But to esteem yourself is I told you I worked in a prison, and the kids who scored the highest on self-esteem scales were the delinquent kids, the juveniles who couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't do anything except steal, and they had very high self-esteem. And if you looked at them cross-eyed, that was disrespecting them, because of course they had such high self-esteem that if somebody disrespected it, then you deserve to be hurt.
So it led to trouble. So for these kids that you were
yeah,
in your experience.
yeah. I mean, there's no need for self-esteem.
All right. I hear you. Anyone else? Argue, think, thoughts? I would love to hear. Jump in. Any other thoughts on this?
I think to have self-esteem, you really have to know yourself also. You have to know what your strengths are. You have to know what you can contribute. I mean, that's how personally I would view it.
Right.
Just thinking about myself.
And you're a
other
mom,
people.
right?
Yeah.
You're raising kids. Right. We want our children to have a concept of self, right? But it can lead to a trap. It can lead to trouble. It can lead to the inability to deal with other people properly. Or sometimes a false sense of self is also dangerous, right? Can also be a trap, because then they go out in the world and suddenly, guess what? There are maybe someone who's smarter, smarter, prettier, more charismatic. So a sense of self to be healthy and balanced is really important. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe actually talks about this story that his father-in-law had told about the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe asks some really, really interesting questions. The Rebbe says, why was this the Alter Rebbe's answer? Number one, he's talking to a 3-year-old. Why couldn't you have given the simplistic answer that the Razak gives or the Klayakar gives? Why this more sophisticated answer? It doesn't seem almost like it doesn't match. And why bring in Adam? Okay. And what's interesting is the Rebbe mentions that where it talks about Adam, it has actually in the Divrei Yamim has a big aleph to talk about his sense of self, that he understood his talents. He knew he was wise. He makir mailasa atzma. He knew his milas, his good character traits. And therefore it actually led to the sin, right? He understood that he's kapav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he's made by God's hands. He has a part of Hashem in him, right? Why bring up Adam at all in this conversation? Why does a 3-year-old A? B, why is the Alter Rebbe why are we shedding a negative light on Adam? It wouldn't just be a story told to like contrast. He could have just said a compliment to Moshe, tied it into a perfect lesson for a 3-year-old, and that's it. Move forward. Does it almost like the answer kind of, it seems very big for the question. 3-year-old's asking a simple question, give them a simple answer. And why that deep meditation that the Alter Rebbe engaged in. So the Rebbe asks those questions. Why bring up Adam at all? Why mention the Aleph from Divrei Hayamim, the big Aleph? And why bring out any negativity in Adam? Okay. So the Rebbe goes on to answer a very fascinating answer that I think is a really powerful takeaway. So I ask this to students before Rosh Hashanah. We're getting ready for a new year. And I ask students this question. And I'm going to ask you this question too. Think of, and you don't have to say it out loud. If you want to, you can. But think of 5 things that are your strengths where you really shine. Okay? Take a minute and think of those 5 things that are areas that you really shine. Okay? that are uniquely you. Now, think of areas that you can improve as a person. Okay? Which list is easier to come up with? The first one or the second one?
Second.
The second, right? I did this in this experiment many times. I've done it with students. If anyone disagrees, jump in. But I did this with students, and I find when I say say out loud 3 things that are uniquely you, that are special, that you have to offer this world. And the body language, when I watch the body language in a discussion, it gets very uncomfortable, a little bit guarded. People get very uncomfortable. Why? Because for some reason, we have this idea that I can't necessarily talk about my strengths. And yet when I ask them to make a list of things that you need to improve on, second list is there. Seconds. So something so fascinating about human nature that we can think of all the things that we need to work on and all the things we need to improve on. And it's important to know those things, right? Yet somehow knowing our strengths is a little more uncomfortable. So what was the message that the Alter Rebbe was actually telling young Tzemach Tzedek, young Menachem Mendel? And what is it relevant to us? How is it relevant to us? The contrast between Adam's sense of self, knowing his strengths, knowing he's created by God, knowing he's here for a reason, super, super important. But also knowing that the gifts and the talents we have are gifts and talents from Hashem. The fact that you were born with a certain genetic code that gives you an ability to maybe do something that you didn't feel you could do or you weren't aware of. It's a gift. And we have to recognize that it's a gift from Hashem. And the gift that we have from Hashem in this area with these talents or these skills or these abilities, since it's a gift from Hashem, because we're created by God, we have to use it to bring light into the world. We have to use it to partner with God in whatever area we can and bringing our own unique light and our own unique talent into the world. But the Rebbe takes it a step further. The Rebbe says not only is important to know your strengths and have a balance in who you are and knowing your milas, your character traits, and realizing, yes, you have these gifts, but also these gifts come from Hashem. But in addition, you actually have to be able to see it in others as well. And I was having this discussion with some students about the subject exactly. And the conversation went on to say, like, okay, it's deep work to truly, truly understand the gifts that you have and realize that you got to step up to the plate. It's not okay to just be like, yeah, I have this talent or this gift or this ability, but like, whatever, a false sense of humility, because then the world is going to be missing who you are and your own unique light and what you can contribute to the world. It's just as important to also be able to have space, but making space for others and seeing them and their talents and their gifts and their abilities, that's a deep work. So really, what the Alter Rebbe was saying is to this young child, you're embarking on a journey of learning Torah. And Torah is Chachmasai Uritzanei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means God's will and God's wisdom. It's the blueprint of how you and I, the manual of how you and I can live in this world, maximize our potential, bring our own unique light that Hashem created us as unique as our DNA to the world. And remember that we also are created by Hashem. We're also here for a reason. We're partners with Hashem Krishna. I always tell students, it's not a mistake that you're here. You have a function. Your role is as important as Esther or Miriam or Moses. Each one of us have our gifts and our abilities. And we have a responsibility to help the world see that. There's a very beautiful story where there was a Chabad shliach, and he was feeling very, very down. He was feeling like he was failing, things weren't working. And he wrote all of his, basically a resignation letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, it seems, he said, I already sent to your city a rabbi, a shliach, and he wrote his name. Maybe you should get to know him. What was the Rebbe saying? The Rebbe was saying, you have it within you. Get to know who you are. Get to know your gifts and abilities. And so often when I see students who are struggling with esteem or sense of self, they have not yet realized the gifts that Hashem has given them. And even more so, their responsibility to bring that light into the world. Carmel, were you going to say something? Did you want to jump in?
Oh, no, no, no.
No, feel free. This is not meant to be a monologue.
No, just completely agree with what you're saying.
So the Rebbe said to him, you need to do this practically. So it's important though for ourselves. And it's also important for us to be able to see that in others, because when we see it in others, then we help them shine their light and bring their light into the world. Right? That I see so often. So to me, it's not about self-esteem. Do you know what an empowering message it is to someone to know that you are here for a reason? And Hashem, the Rebbe said that your birthday is a day that God decided the entire world could not exist without you. It's the day that says you matter. The world needs you. So it's not like, oh, I don't have a good sense of self. It's that the world needs me, who I am, my talents, my gifts, my abilities. I almost have an obligation to bring that light into the world. I have this responsibility. And the Rebbe goes on to explain the Torah, which is God's will and God's wisdom. Which font is it written in? The tiny Vayikra, the Aleph font, the small one from the Vayikra, or the big one from Adam, from Divrei Hayamim? The font in the Torah, if you call it a font, is in the middle. Because in this area, we need balance. We need awareness of self, and we need to be able to understand the gifts and abilities. Try this activity with your children. Try this activity with yourself. What are the things that you're good at? What are the things you can improve in? It should be a very interesting conversation piece, because as I tell the students, as important as successes are, failures are also. It's balance, it's awareness. So as important of ego, and I'm here for a reason, that's how important also a deeper understanding of others are here for a reason too, and keeping our personality in check, in balance, and heading into a space of balance. Anyone want to jump in with some practical ways we could do that for ourselves and for others in our lives? Any practical examples? So remember that mother who asked me about child self-esteem? I actually told the mom, I don't think the best solution is putting your kid in more honors classes or more extracurricular activities. I actually asked the mom, what does your child do for themselves? What does your child do for others? Is your child volunteering? Is your child doing things for others? Is your child seeing the successes in who they are and what they do? You know, on a personal note, raising kids in College Station, Texas, you know, it's not necessarily the best place to raise a Hasidic family. It's not like, oh, let's find the best place to raise a nice Hasidic family. College Station, Texas is the answer. It's not. As you can imagine, there are no schools. Though for my kids, this has been, you know, I guess a silver lining for them. It's business as usual. They're still in online school. They want to know why everyone's freaking out from having their kids home. They're like, we're always home. And I'm like, well, it's not so normal, you know? But one of the things that I've seen is that my children, because I've gotten this question, like, are your children resentful about this lifestyle? Is this difficult? And there are moments that are very difficult. There are moments where my children are aware of the fact that they're, you know, I'm the only Hasidic, the only kid in a yarmulke walking around town, this entire city for 100 miles, right? I don't have friends. So that are local, that are my age, that are living the life I'm living. And sometimes that can be challenging for children. But one of the things that Yassi and I have really worked to do is for the children to see the impact that they have and the impact of what it means to be the Rebbe Shluchim in a city and bring light into the world. And that's for our lifestyle. But you know what? Each and every child, wherever they are, need to understand that there is work for them to do. And when I walk in here and I see a student who's really sad and really had, you know, let's say a traumatic experience, and they're sitting on the couch and they're having a deep, meaningful conversation with one of my 10-year-olds. And later I said to the student, how you doing? And the student says, you know, your 10-year-old really cheered me up, because they looked at me and they said, Mommy, like, they said to the student, like, how are you? You look like sad. And the student was able to talk to them. It was obviously not such a high level, sophisticated issue. So obviously it was developmentally appropriate. But they were able to, my child was able to be compassionate and hear and listen. And I went back to the child and I said, you know, you made a difference in that student's life by just listening, by just being there. And I think that each and every one of us has the ability And like I said, I was saying before that my kids, you know, as they get older, they're able to see the impact of what it means that we're here in this Chabad, that we're here. And what it means that we run a Chabad house and how we can bring light into the world, each and every one of us in our own realities. So you may not be living in College Station and you may not be running a Chabad house, but if you're a professor, if you're a mom, if you're a doctor, wherever you are, you have the responsibility to look deep, find the gifts and abilities and talents you have, and bring that light into the world. Any practical ideas of how we can do that? Anyone want to jump in? Or anyone want to share anything?
Manya, hi.
Hi,
Everybody.
how are you? Oh, I would love to
I'm
hear.
good.
Go ahead, jump in.
Thank you. Well, going back to like what your kids do and stuff. So since I've known you, I've had a lot of transformations in my life just being around you. But one that really stuck out with me that it took me a while, and I'm just going to be clearly transparent with all of you, is that, so I grew up in South Florida, and I come from parents who, you know, programmed me. Like from the time I got up till the time I went to bed, it was like program. You know, you're going to do your chores, then you're going to practice this, then you're going to go to the, you know, piano, then you're going to do. So I was just like this program person, and it's taken me like a lifetime to, and I'm still got remnants of that ticking away. So when I became a mother, I found that all this came out. And so I went overboard, and it's not, you know, I've done, and I've corrected, and it's all a learning style. But going back, there was a moment, I don't know exactly, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that I just had this moment, and I was watching your children, and I think it dawned on me that if I took everything, stripped everything away from my kids today, I'm not sure who they would know who they are without what they do. And so this has been something that I have tried to balance more. I'm not saying don't have your children, and, you know, my girls ice skate, and right now that's, well, they're not even doing that right now. But we've scaled back on all the other stuff, and it's okay. Like I had to let go. So, but when I watched your children, Manya, and I saw that they didn't have all this extra stuff, but deep down, they were still happy. They were still learning. They were still being creative. They were doing everything that kids need to do in life. I'm not saying that everybody has to grow up like your children. That's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, I think the light that your children, what your family has shown in many different ways, and maybe you didn't know this, but the impact, one of the impacts that it has had on my life is that it was a moment of awakening for me to say, Sharon, you need to, don't repeat. And I love my parents. They did the best that they could do with me, right? I mean,
we all do the best we can, and we're all going to mess up, and that's what therapy is for. It's okay. It's okay. I once heard an amazing Dr. Hannah Silverstein. She runs Chabad at Ithaca at Cornell, and she said every stage in life has a developmental goal. Like babyhood's about attachment, and toddlerhood's about exploration, and, you know, childhood's about identity, and teenagehood's about, you know, independence, and she said, and adulthood's about getting over your childhood. It's brilliant. Sharon, were you finished? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that was basically it. So talking about self-esteem, going back to that, I'm still on this journey, of course, but one of the things that I didn't want to get into the trap that I see so many of my friends and other people, we're all guilty. I think I don't know if it's an American thing or what, but, you know, like from the time the kid gets home from school, it's just like program. And, you know, I'm a well-educated person, and I was even falling into this trap. So trying to hold back. I mean, there's moments where I'm like, oh, I want my kid in that. It was like, stop, Sharon, stop. As
parents, we also have to ask ourselves, is it about the kid or is it about us? I once was giving a parenting workshop on how to raise kids with a strong Jewish pride. And it was another Chabad house that brought me down to do this workshop. And one of the parents said, like, you know, I want to know, like, for my child, how many times should I like learn out, do this with them or that with them? You know, everyone else's kid is in this program, that program, this program, that program. All my kid wants to do is climb trees and read books. The child, I said, how old's your child? They said 5. I'm like, your child needs to be climbing trees and reading books. If they can't do that at 5, when should they? Like, there's a healthy balance. And I agree with giving our kids opportunities, whether it's music lessons. I'm not against it. But I think, like you said, we have to make sure our children have a strong sense of who they are and that they're so precious. They have a part of Hashem in them. They have a neshama. They're here for a reason. and the world needs our light. Because you know what's empowering? Knowing that you have an impact in the world. And obviously, we're all on this journey in our own way, you know, with our own realities. We have to, like you said, re-examine how we're doing things, why we're doing things. And I give you a lot of credit because it's not always easy to like notice where the patterns are coming from and notice and you say, like, really overcome the instinctive, like, I want my child to have this opportunity. And we're so blessed that our children are living in an age with so many opportunities, but those opportunities have not led to happier, healthier children. So we got to like recalibrate, you know, we got to realign. And I think actually, and I'm going to go to this, it starts with us. It starts with us. Can I be okay with my strengths and my weaknesses? And a lot of times we have to challenge a narrative in our head. Where's this narrative coming from? How long am I holding on to this narrative? Is it even a narrative that's true? Is it a reality? And I think this message from the Alter Rebbe was such a powerful message. Like, know your strengths, but don't overdo it. Balance. And the Torah is all about giving us that sense of balance and purpose in this world. So we need to make sure that we understand why we're here and what light we need to bring. We need to give our children those opportunities. And I really thank you, Sharon, for sharing that. But I think you're onto something really, really special. And I think your children are very, very lucky that you're realizing that. They are. They're very blessed because it's not easy. It's not easy to confront those things within our own psyche. It's not comfortable. Like, who wants to, you know? And like, again, of course, nothing against parents. Our parents, every single one of our parents did the best they could. I told my children once when one of my kids were like, you know, you and Tati, you don't understand me, you know, that typical, like, no one understands me, you know, and I was like, you know what, first of all, you're right, because there's a part of us that we're always learning about, and you don't understand yourself. And the child was like, oh, that's true, interesting. And then I said, remember that if God wanted us to be raised by perfection, he would not have given the job to humans. He would have given the job to angels, AIs, that do what they're told. The angel of death is not like, actually, I'm not really in a mood. No. So God gave us those children. That's why we believe, Kabbalah teaches us that parents, the third partner in a child in this world is Hashem. Because male, female, and Hashem. Because no matter what a male and female do physiologically, at the end of the day, the fact that a child is born and a soul is in a body is a miracle and a gift from Hashem. And I think we have to remember that. And we have to learn how to let go of our own, like someone once told us with our first child, and with Menachem, and I'll never forget it, that Menachem was 2. And he said, children come into the world good. Don't mess it up. The trick is not to mess it up, whatever, we'll all do it. It's okay. But I think that this is a really powerful takeaway. And it's at any point in the journey, you're a student, you're struggling with your self-concept or your self-esteem, go out and do for someone else, go out and find your inner light, go understand, get to know who you are and your strengths, and also get to see those strengths in others. I think that's a very powerful takeaway. Any other thoughts? Anyone else want to jump in or experiences?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to overtake, but
no. I this is meant to be interactive. I'm not,
you know, so powerful because you just stated something that goes, I mean, completely against what our society tells us. The message is, so I should write that on my refrigerator. Do something to remind me all the time. Yeah, that is powerful.
Why do you think it goes against society?
The message that, I mean, giving and thinking, I mean, everything, if you think about, I don't know, I was thinking about my mommy friends and it's the situation, you know, what can I do better for my kids' homework? What can I do? You know, always like we're servants. Yes, to a certain point we are their servants. You're right. But it's, the child is not, I mean, if you think about in general society here in this country, anyway, I'm not saying about Africa and other places, but I mean, the kid is served. They come with rights.
Out of my house. Out of my house. I mean, whatever. My kids, yeah, no, they have to adjust to that because, yeah, they all got to pitch in. I think that's the gift of having 6 kids. Everyone's going to be part of it. Like everyone's going to have no choice but to help be involved. But it's actually been a blessing for them. And I think they see it now. It's what I wanted to just kind of share is understanding this idea of the paradox or the balance between self-esteem and humility. I think that we can all learn, like, know your talents and gifts, know your strengths, and keep that, you know, keep that in check. And I think that for us to help to role model that for our children and to give them opportunities to give and give them opportunities to shine their own and unique light and support them in doing that, you know, just they're amazing. And they're here. They're not just, you know, for me, having the triplets was really powerful. It was like a moment to really see like each kid comes into the world. They're raised at the same time, the same nurture, the same circumstances, the same external realities, like in the discussion of developmental, you know, nature versus nurture and the impact. And then I was like 3 kids, same time, same reality. Everything is the same, totally different humans, different talents, different gifts, different abilities, different ways to process emotion, intellect, everything. And for me, it was a really humbling experience as a parent because it was like, you really are just a partner with Hashem in creation. We're just this vehicle to bring this godly, divine soul with a unique area in the world that it needs to bring light into the world. So that also takes a dose of humility on our end. And
Can
moving
I ask you a question about
Go
that?
for it. Yeah.
If I have a friend and she has kids that I have this friend and she has some kids that just strike me as kind of spoiled. I feel like this person just isn't that consistent about like enforcing rules. Should I like say something to her about that, or should I just
No, it's a good question. I think if she asks you about it, if she says to you and exasperated, like, oh my gosh, my kids, you could say, you know what, it seems like I actually would be very, very careful because I think like there's so many, I love those. Some people post on like a post on Facebook and everyone has different, so many opinions. I would, if your friend mentioned, like if a good friend of mine, I'm really good friends and they mentioned, like, I'm really struggling with this kid, I would be very, very careful about how I spoke to them. Because chances are they will, as really our children raise us, we grow up with our children. That's the fact. Like we grow up from the process of raising children. That's what we learn, to really work on our own character traits. It's nothing like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden my kids are so sharp with each other. And then I'd be like, look in the mirror. Oops, I've been sharp, So I think that your friend will probably learn, unless the friend turns to you and says, what should I do? Or what do you see going on? I'd be very careful about, coming to them with, parenting advice or anything like that at that point. You know what I actually told the mom who said her child needs to, be in karate and piano and doesn't want to do any of these things. Like I think the kid was 5 or 6. I actually told the mom that she needs to get off of Facebook and it seems like she needs to get a hobby. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, because I think you're trying to live through your child. She's like, I didn't have all those opportunities. My child has these opportunities and they don't want them. And I said, you know what? Go take on some hobbies. Go volunteer. Let your kid be a kid. So I know that we're a little bit off subject, but I want to just bring it back to kind of wrap up because we're going to, unless anyone else wants to share, I'm going to try to keep these to about 45 minutes because I found that on Zoom, it's harder to keep track after about an hour. It gets a little bit long. So I'm going to try to keep these to about 45 minutes and we'll continue learning. Feel free to invite anyone else to join us every single Wednesday, 12:30, our Torah and Tea. I just want to wrap up that one of the gifts that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave his followers was he gave them a strong sense of responsibility for the world and for the continued Jewish people and for a strong sense of an obligation to give to others and bring light into the world, to be ambassadors of light. But it wasn't limited to his shluchim. The Rebbe really felt that and really tried to empower everyone. And, all the 10 mitzvah campaigns that the Rebbe really rolled out, he never told us exactly how to do it. He gave us the fundamental ideas of being Avat Yisrael and taking care of another person's needs. And the how was really, obviously within the boundaries of halacha, but really independent. Each, person in their own way can figure out how to do it. So I feel like that sense of empowerment and sense of knowledge that we're here for a reason is something that we really, really need to try to live with and then give over. I can't tell you in the past, let's say 10 days, the moments of panic or the moments of worry that overtook me when I hear someone else either passed away or someone else is in the hospital or someone's been diagnosed and the awareness, that fear, that worry. And I noticed how when I get to that space of fear and worry, it like literally saps the energy out of me, saps the vitality out of me. I suddenly will get a headache. I'll get symptoms. Like the body is so fascinating. But I think the moments that we're focused on giving to others, and this is something so beautiful that's coming out of this. And we should never know from this. And please, God, it should end as quickly as it showed up. It should disappear. Okay. This virus that's overtaken the world. But I think we could walk away with an understanding. We're all in this together. And to see the amount of good that's going on. And let's get our kids in on it. Let's let them see what light they have that they can give into the world right now. It will do very, very good for them. And let's find it. Let's role model it for ourselves. How can I reach out? And I challenged last week's students. I said, reach out to 5 people and just check in on them. See how they're doing. Find your light and let that light shine. And let's help find the light and help the light shine in others. Okay? It's a wrap. Thank you for joining, and we'll continue to learn Torah together. I think next week we'll start Pesach learning, some amazing, strong women that we got to study about. Miriam, this amazing. We'll talk about it. Okay? To be continued. Be in touch. Feel free to invite others. Okay?
Thank you.
Have an amazing week. Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe.
Oh, you too.
Yes.
Bye, Manya.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, guys.